Main quest, level 2, add 5 beauties of the initiate rank to the harem. Quest completed when the host puts a ring on their fingers. Main rewards, cultivation base breakthrough, grand level physique choice, grand level cultivation method choice. Ability rewards, ecstasy cloud. Hearing the content of the second quest, Conrad was taken aback. Wait, so it's not just about obtaining beauties? As the quest level increases, the requirement on the beauty's cultivation level also rises? Yep. With each new level, the number of beauties you gotta add to the harem increases alongside cultivation requirements. So, when you said 10,000 beauties to complete the main quest, you meant 10,000 divine rank beauties. 10,000 goddesses, yep. Conrad's body bent into a bow shape, and he almost fell onto the ground. It is well known that the holy rank is the highest within the empire and even the entire world. Let's not even talk about fulfilling that requirement. Where am I supposed to find goddesses? He bawled. That's your problem, man. I'm just the one giving tasks, rewards, and punishments. What was bullying? This was bullying. Quickly, Conrad mapped up the requirements that all levels of the main quest would probably have and was quickly deterred by the potential numbers. But the system wasn't done with him. Timeframe, 3 days. Failure equals castration and system removal. This time, Conrad could no longer stand firm, he tripped and fell with his back on the ground. For real? For real. In any case, I have a body regeneration passive ability. 'Cause you think I won't take that away? Only now did he realize that the almighty system really held him by the balls. In the future, he would have to be more polite. Of course, the difficulty only made the game more interesting. Without challenges, how can there be entertainment? I have a feeling this game will be the most entertaining I've ever played. Wanna get your side quests? You bet. Side quest initialization. Side quest, have a threesome. Rewards, 3000 EXP, random true rank item. Time frame, infinite. With the info dumping now out of the way, it was time to devise a plan. At the early stages of the main quest, going from a woman to another might be a viable plan, but quickly, considering the given timeframes, that would become unviable. And as he dug through his acquired memories, Conrad found the solution to his problem. Conquer the few to conquer the many. The inner court was a place dominated by the imperial concubines. Each possessed outstanding personal attendants who in turn could command larger numbers of maids. Taking the lowest ranked concubines, for example, they were allowed 2 personal attendants and 1 head eunuch. Personal attendants each controlled 10 maids. Head eunuchs each had 10 subordinate eunuchs. That was already a hefty sum. Likewise, head palace maids held, in theory, a status similar to the personal attendants and were each in charge of 10 maids. That being the case, as long as Conrad could conquer 1 head palace maid, getting his hands on 5 maids was simple. But there was one problem. He had no guarantee they would satisfy the cultivation requirements. The cultivation of the low-ranked palace maids was heterogeneous, going from 0 to the initiate rank. Mid-ranked palace maids were usually at the adept rank while head palace maids were at the true rank. A suitable target had to be picked. He stood up and walked back into his quarters. There were still a few hours left before the sun reared its head. Hours he could use to get some well-deserved rest. His room was shared with 2 other young eunuchs who currently snored within their beds. Not paying them any heed, Conrad pulled off his boots, changed into his sleeping attire and slipped into his bed. Meanwhile, Aliki and Phaedra, the 2 maids tasked with disposing of Conrad's body, were engaging in a heated debate. How can you not want to report it? He was canned to death under the orders of the holy consort. Him being alive expressively goes against her will. He either used some method to fake his death or the beating wasn't sufficiently brutal, but in any case, he is alive. Upon sobering from their initial bout of hysteria, the 2 maids inferred that Conrad had just not died. But now that he had come back to life, the question of what to report had risen. Stupid. We were tasked with disposing of the body. The moment he woke up, We should have executed him and carried on with our task, but instead, we ran and came back here. If we inform the holy consort and she asks us why we didn't just end him, what are we supposed to say? Knowing her, she won't even ask us anything. She will just have us executed. That was indeed the core issue. The holy consort was known to be cruel and unforgiving. There was no difference between getting on her nerves and death. There is only one thing left to do. Kill him. At the 5th step of the Adept Knight rank, Aliki and Phaedra were not just beautiful vases and could snap an average grown man's neck in one move. Thus, they never thought they could have any issue in silently dealing with a low-ranked eunuch. Simultaneously, they dashed toward the kitchen eunuch's eastern courtyard at a speed of more than 80 meters per second. With all the recent events and the whole reincarnation deal still weighing on his shoulders, it wouldn't be long before Conrad fell asleep. But he wasn't even given a 10-minute break before the system's alarmed voice echoed within his head. Alert, alert! Man, quickly get up! Conrad ignored it and tried to wander into some sweet dreams. Dude, get the fuck up! People are coming to kill you! Whoa! Conrad rolled from his bed and fell onto the ground in a brusque thud. Who? Where? How do you know that? I can sense any malicious intent aimed at you within a 100-meter radius. It's 2 women and they are moving fast. You have less than 2 seconds. Conrad wasted no time, and at a speed of 80 meters per second, he shot toward the exit, slammed the door open, and rushed south far from prying eyes. Cultivation? 5th step Adept Knight. He was aware that his transformation skill could not deceive people with higher cultivation bases, so he didn't bother trying. If they were men, he could only try to make as much noise as possible to force them into fleeing. But since they were women, since you brought yourselves into my demonic clutches, allow me to officially welcome you to my harem. At the adept rank, knights could move at more than 80 meters per second and possessed an arm strength of at least 500 kilograms. Of course, the higher the step, the greater those numbers were. Conrad had just reached the 1st step Adept Knight rank and was thus much slower than the maids whose speed already approached 100 meters per second. It wouldn't be long before they caught up to him. Humph! We have been deceived. That guy is clearly at the Adept Knight rank. No wonder he could survive the canning. It matters not. Once we get him, off with his head. The distance between them shrunk at breakneck speed, with Conrad apparently struggling to increase the gap. But when they only stood a few steps away from him, he abruptly spun to face them and released the full power of his half-incubus aura. As his cultivation base increased, so did his control over his incubus abilities. And his innate skills were also substantially growing in power. Against a female in the same realm, if there only was a difference of a few steps, he could bridge the gap with his skill set. Formless power burst from his body and invaded Phaedra and Aliki. They staggered, stopping dead in their tracks with a sense of alarm spreading within their eyes. Before they could react, a strange titillating sensation spread within their bodies and their pearl-white cheeks were flushed red. What? But before they could make sense of the sensation, Conrad attacked. Ecstasy fingers. Pink-colored flames rose from and coated his fingers. He struck out, respectively grabbing Phaedra and Aliki's left and right breast and causing the pink flames to move past their pores and invade their bodies. Shaw shameless. MHM. Staggering some more, they attempted to use their cultivation to suppress both the nefarious fire spreading within them and the moans about to escape their lips. Bang! Conrad showed no mercy and threw a double punch. His fists crashed into their sternums and sent them flying backward. The impact caused their last bit of strength to crumble and the mixture between Conrad's sexually charged aura and pink flames to smash their last defenses into smithereens. What kind of evil art is this? The art of taming unruly bitches. Invented by your daddy Conrad. Conrad complacently replied while cracking his flaming fingers. Taking a better look at them, he had to admit they were particularly striking. They were both blonde with long hairs tied in stylish braids, full cherry red lips and sky blue almond eyes that sparkled like gems. The spacious cyan robes they wore failed to hide their large breasts and pear-shaped bubble butts which could lit sinful fire in any man, and at first glance, it was clear that they were sisters. Hey, let's play. Seeing the evilness within his eyes, the sisters were overwhelmed with dread. Conrad's criminal hands shot toward them and ruthlessly massaged every corner of their luscious bodies, turning even the most ordinary part into a titillating erogenous zone. Ah, stop. Shameless. Shameless bastard. Get your dirty hands off us. No, more. I want more. Oh. On, don't stop, please don't stop. Yes, right there. MHM. Oh. In less than a minute, they went from angry muffled moans to full-blown pleasure gasps and drenched their pants in sex-craving juice. They now laid on their bellies with their robes on the ground and their bubble butts being massaged and played within Conrad's firm hands. Like a chef, Conrad kneaded their breasts and butt cheeks while cooking them into orgasm only to deny them when they approached the edge. He then retracted his hands and stood up to stare down on them. They were a mess, lying in a pool of their own juice with their undergarments ready to fall at any time. Why? Why did you stop? You must continue. Their voices were both forceful, confused and pleading. But Conrad paid them no heed and only maintained his stare. Their attention then drifted toward the large bulge within his pants and their eyes glazed with lust. I want. Good girls get it. Bad girls beg for it. The overpowering sexual desire setting their luscious bodies ablaze was leading them by the nose. They crawled toward Conrad's thigh and wrapped their arms around his legs while staring at his bulge with greedy eyes. Please, we beg you. Give it to us. Who am I to refuse the plight of the common people? Without further ado, Conrad rid himself of his pants and released his elongated shaft which glittered in golden light. Is that normal? Aliki asked while poking the rod with her index. Maybe, this is the power of true might? The highest realm of virility. It must be. Nothing he hadn't heard before. The hardened rod was ready for assault. Conrad shredded their undergarments and effortlessly raised Aliki into the air while aiming his shaft at Phaedra's lips. Do you know what to do? It didn't take a genius to understand what he wanted, and driven by hunger, although inexperienced, she still said, I will do my best. And pounced onto him. In the meantime, Conrad tugged on Aliki's erect nipples while his right hand held her waist and his left teased her ass. On. Soft moans escaped her lips while he toyed with her flaming body and caused her juice to overflow on Phaedra's head. Conrad then held her by the thighs and lifted her above his head to press his lustful tongue against her clit. Oh! Slurp, slurp, slurp. The slurping sounds of the licking above and the sucking below mixed with Aliki's unrestrained moans in a delightful symphony that caused Conrad's engorged rod to swell within Phaedra's hungry throat. Her arms wrapped around his waist and she sucked him with every ounce of vigor she possessed. More than making up in enthusiasm what she lacked in skill. Aliki's legs clamped around Conrad, who relished in the juice flowing into his mouth, and feeling the trembling of her limbs around his head, he knew she was reaching her peak. Oh-hoo! She groaned and squirted on Conrad's face. But he didn't stop. Keeping her pussy pressed against his face, he leaned back and dropped onto his rear, sitting to give Phaedra a new angle while he renewed his teasing of Aliki's delicious body. I can't take this anymore. Phaedra muttered as her tongue coiled around Conrad's shaft. Without warning or permission, she stood up and impaled herself on his rod. Arg! But when the jolt of pain caused by her broken hymen should have ripped her asunder, golden light spread from the rod and not only erased her pain but heightened her sensitivity to a nigh debilitating state. Bold girl! Who gave you permission? But although Conrad used angered words, his face was full of smile, and his tone of amusement. Sorry, you can punish me later, she said, and immediately began riding him in reverse cowgirl. Pa pa pa. The sound of her ass slamming on his balls rose and competed with her furious moans. More, master, give me more. This is good. Aliki was no better, and quickly, the sisters abandoned their bodies to primal lust and a succession of orgasms. Then they switched, with Aliki now getting her chance to write a new paradise while Phaedra tasted the delights of Conrad's tongue. Positions shifted, sweaty bodies intertwined in a carnal dance with technique giving way to primitive instincts. Phaedra was now lying on the ground with her mouth in Aliki's pussy and Conrad hammering her with firm thrusts. Then it came. Oh who? Ko-kuming. And they came. Aliki wrapped her arms around Conrad and kissed him with intense fervor while squirting on her sister's face. Conrad's shaft shook and nut in Phaedra, whose legs were spread wide with her body shuddering from the massive orgasm. And the three rolled on the ground with the girls falling into Conrad's arm. Congratulations, host, for completing the side quest. Reward time. Host gains 3000 EXP. Host can pick a random true rank item in the Wheel of Fortune. Man, saying host is so annoying. But we gotta look official, right? Conrad's mind had drifted into the system in which a silver lottery wheel now swirled in front of him. Stop. The wheel stopped with its arrow pointing toward the fated item. No way. It was a palm-sized purple bead that on all accounts looked quite ordinary. But the description beside it caused Conrad's eyes to widen with disbelief. True suppression bead, within 100 meters radius, it conceal the cultivations of those in the true knight rank or below. Within 100 meters radius, it can cause the spiritual power of true priests and below to work in reverse. If the owner is of incubus blood, it can hide the presence of their aura and increase the sexual frustration of targeted females. Twice upgradable. Seeing the information unfolding in his eyes, Conrad could not help but stare slack-jawed. Cheat. Bullshit cheat. Bullshit tailor-made cheat. Luck. Bullshit luck. In what world could such a good thing happen? The world is my oyster. But then he saw the fine print, and his excitement died down in a heartbeat. Must be fed true rank female juice once every 7 days. Otherwise, it will suck the host's cultivation. And before the host reaches the true priest rank, each ability can only be used once a day. Well, I suppose that can only be more motivation. He then checked his total experience points and was surprised to see a whopping 5515. His total experience points had increased by more than 5,000? How was that possible? How is EXP reward calculated? Depends on the girl's cultivation level. At the adept rank, for example, it goes from 100 to 900 EXP. Then you have a bonus of 10% for each beauty grade, and another 50% for virginity. Those girls were each virgin, grade 10 beauties, at the 5th step adept knight rank, so you get 500 by 2.5 for each one of them. Stop, enough math, I get it. You asked. Conrad no longer wasted breath on the system and returned to the real world. Although there were some things he could buy with his current EXP points, it was definitely better to save and accumulate for what really mattered, the bloodline upgrade. And as he opened his eyes, the purple bead alongside 2 harem rings appeared within his hands. Meanwhile, Phaedra and Aliki were sleeping within his arms with the look of satisfied kittens. Time to mark them and move on with the next stage of the main quest. While Conrad enjoyed the sensation of the 2 beauties resting on his chest, Dawn was rearing its head, and soon, activities would resume within the inner court. It was time to leave. Gently, he tickled them into awakening, pushed them to the side and stood up. As they woke from their sex-induced torpor, he got dressed in the usual blue eunuch garments and tossed them their robes. What do you plan to do now? As if by previous agreement, the girls fell onto their knees and pledged. Master, from now on, we will serve only you. The effects of incubus shagging and the golden rod were a delight to the eyes. With his back facing them, Conrad clasped his hands beneath his back and adopted the stance of a lofty expert. I can accept your devotion and reward you accordingly, but that will depend on your contributions. Master, what do you want us to do? Give me a list of the head palace maids of the clothing and embroidery departments. I want names, habits, birthplaces, everything of relevance. The clothing and embroidery departments were the closest to the kitchen department and housed a great number of beauties. It was said that besides the dancing department, their girls were the best. Naturally, Conrad would target them. In just a few minutes, the sisters quickly drafted a list which they respectfully passed to Conrad. Satisfied, he gave them a pat on the heads and presented them with the 2 ruby harem rings. Wearing those rings mean that you forever belong to me. Are you willing? We're willing. Their clear tone showed no hesitation whatsoever, and although he let nothing transpire on his face, Conrad was inwardly shocked. He had not expected that the combination of the golden rod and his new powers to prove so devastating. I suppose you only work under one of the holy consort's personal attendants? Usually that is the case, but for this task, she asked us personally. I see. If you're asked, say that you've disposed of the body. If you're not asked, say nothing. I will make sure this lie lasts long enough for the truth to become irrelevant. Now come here. They stood up and walked toward him with eyes full of expectations. He grabbed them by the waists and one after the other, invaded their lips and necks with his tongue, kissing and covering them in more hickeys than they could ever handle. MHHMH. After parting from the blonde sisters, Conrad returned to his quarters and was surprised to see his eunuch roommates still snoring. Really, you could kill them in their sleep, and they would never know. What a useless bunch. Weren't you about to be killed in your sleep too? Having learned from past mistakes, Conrad didn't try to counterattack. The system was the king of low jabs. He would have to practice some more to be his match. I still have 2 hours before the sun rises, huh? Better than nothing. He fell face first into his hard pillow and passed out on the bed. 2 hours passed in a flash, and the footsteps of thousands of individuals rising to attend to their respective duties in orderly manners soon echoed within the inner court. Conrad was no exception and rose to dive into the fray alongside his eunuch roommates. Hey Conrad, didn't you get summoned by the holy consort? What happened? Yeah, did you get a reward or some secret assignment? Asked Ralph and Alan. Those two had joined the palace at around the same time as Conrad and had been assigned to the same quarters and duties. If their relationship with the original Conrad was not bad, it was also not too close. I did receive a secret assignment and will soon report back to the holy consort with large, deep, and overwhelming results. The 2 eunuchs were taken aback. That assignment must have been of vital and paramount importance, and from Conrad's tone, they could hear that he would hammer it with firm, piercing thrusts, not stopping until it laid conquered on the floor. So to speak. Ralph and Alan were convinced that Conrad would soon be promoted and were resolved to suck up to him while they still could. Ha! The first time I saw you I knew you were bound to distinguish yourself. At first glance, it's clear that you're an outstanding young man endowed with countless skills and great abilities. Conrad clearly remembered Ralph saying that his days in the inner court would be full of hardships. Well said, Ralph. It is clear that Conrad is a sharp, witty guy capable of fulfilling great tasks. To be able to spot such a talent so quickly, the holy consort's eyesight is truly extraordinary. Didn't Alan call him a dullard just 3 days ago? Good sycophants. It almost seemed like they had been trained in how to suck up like a boss 101, 201 and 301 in their mother's bellies. In the future, you must take good care of us? Conrad almost vomited. Who is going to take care of you? Son of a bitch, your daddy Conrad only takes care of beauties. He wanted to say but kept those words within his mind. Instead, he adopted the lofty stance of an expert and graced them with a confident smile. That is natural. We're after all brothers who entered the palace together. If we don't take care of each other, who will? I can even give you an opportunity to make some contribution. Immediately, their eyes lit up. Although they were human beings from low backgrounds with no cultivation, if they could make some contribution for the holy consort, they were sure to have a bright future within the inner court. In theory, the Holy Empress had the highest official rank after the Empress Dowager, but just like there was only one Empress, there was also only one Holy Consort. The Holy Consort's status was for all intents and purposes equal to the Empress. Better yet, she was much more adept at political intrigues and controlled more than half of the inner court and concubines. Meanwhile, the empress rarely appeared and often didn't meddle in such machinations. What is it that we're supposed to do? Nothing special. Just give me detailed information on Ileana. The head palace maid? Yes. Unlike the previous body's owner who only did his work, those two had upon arrival began building a solid network and ingratiating themselves with their superiors to make their lives easier. They were quick and efficient and gathered a lot of information on the surrounding departments to be aware of how and who to please and not offend. They would be excellent goons. Well, there is a lot to say actually. Head maid Ileana is a rather special case among the head palace maids. She's the illegitimate daughter of an Uridal count and should belong to ancient nobility. But because of her illegitimate status, she was sent into the palace at the age of 16. However, her cultivation talent is far above average, and despite the suppression she faced, she was able to become a head palace maid in less than 15 years. Now she's almost 40, and it's rumored that her cultivation has reached the higher end of the true knight rank. Even if she hasn't reached the 9th step, she's probably not too far from it. True knights and priests had a lifespan of 300 years, so although Ileana was close to 40, she still looked like a ravishing 20-years-old beauty. Thanks to her cultivation, she managed to obtain the right to choose a family name. But because of her half-human blood, she still faces a lot of difficulties. Still, as a half-lamia, she commands great respect within the embroidery department and takes her work very seriously. It's also said that she desperately seeks high-grade true spirit restoration pills. Definitely a person not to offend. Anyone who reached the true knight rank could be given the imperial knight title and ennobled. Nobles were the only ones allowed to own land and possess family names. But even though he came from the 21st century, Conrad paid little mind to that. Family was a concept that always eluded him. He grew up without one in the most ordinary of orphanages after being abandoned by his birth mother. Was that why he found so much enjoyment in spreading a woman's legs? Nope, it just feels fucking good. What did you say? Nothing. Soon the trio reached the branch of the inner court's kitchen they had been assigned to. Like a little city with 300,000 inhabitants, it was impossible for the inner court to only have one kitchen. It was a large complex of hundreds of large kitchens, each tasked with serving different departments. Naturally, the concubines' meals were always a top priority. Comparing and contrasting the information he had gotten from his eunuch goons with what Aliki and Phaedra had provided him, Conrad decided to make his move. I need to deal with a matter. Would you mind taking my shift? He asked, and they didn't disappoint. We naturally don't. You can go take care of what you want. We definitely won't let anyone notice that you're gone. Both Ralph and Alan found it strange that the Conrad who loved cooking more than his life and would usually never waste an opportunity to get his hands on ingredients was so eager to shrink from his duties. Surely, that was proof of the task's importance. I will not treat you unjustly. Who knows, you might soon be able to get your hands on cultivation methods. The duo's eyes sparkled. Cultivation methods were treasure jealously kept by the nobility, and only the most ordinary manuals were spread among commoners. But even then, their prices were not affordable. Now their resolve to work for Conrad was only strengthened. Without further ado, Conrad sneaked out of the kitchen and shot toward the embroidery department. Eunuchs going and coming was commonplace, and most people would just mind their own business to avoid being punished for slacking off on their duties, so Conrad drew no attention. The best way to draw attention, however, was to stay idle, which is why Conrad used the purple bead to conceal his aura and hid from prying eyes while observing the eunuch pavilions of the embroidery department for a suitable target. It wouldn't be long before he found an ordinary-looking low-ranked eunuch who seemed to be heading toward Ileana's embroidery house to deliver fabrics. Conrad tailed him until there was no one in a clear radius and struck out. Bam! A swift chop to the neck knocked the eunuch unconscious. Conrad carried him into a dark alley, bundled him with robes and gagged his mouth to prevent him from screaming upon waking up. No hard feelings, man. He then used his transformation skill to assume the eunuch's appearance, robbed his token, and took custody of the fabrics which he was now bringing to Ileana's embroidery house. Damn, the things a man gotta do to build a harem and protect his balls. He complained while humming a tune he particularly enjoyed back on Earth. But wow, I impress myself sometimes. Uncle James would be proud. Ileana, it's time for us to meet. Get ready for the time of your life. So you say. But don't forget that people with higher cultivation bases can easily see through your disguise. That means any head eunuch or head palace maid. That means the Ileana gal too. Of course, the system wasn't going to let him get too comfy and struck at his enthusiasm without a shred of mercy. This time, however, Conrad was undisturbed. Don't worry. The only person I will expose myself to today is Ileana, and I can guarantee you that she won't reveal my disguise. What makes you so confident? I calculated with my fingers. There were 3 central parts to a eunuch's attire: the blue robe, the red hat, and the box. The box was tied to their belt and contained their removed part, which they always carried on them due to the common belief that dying without a complete body would prevent reincarnation. The hat was large enough to cover most of their forehead and was in itself a reminder that they should often lower their heads and look toward the ground. Eunuchs were not treated as men and were not expected to act like men. Although they wielded significant power within the inner court, they often walked and ran with slouched backs, except when dealing with individuals of equal or lower positions. Strict hierarchy was the heart of the Holy Flame Empire. At fast pace, Conrad carried the fabrics through the streets of the inner court and arrived in front of Ileana's embroidery pavilion. At the door, 2 maids stood guard. What's your purpose? Delivery of embroidery fabrics. Identity token? Their robotic tone was commonplace among palace maids tasked with guard duties and inspections. Conrad presented the eunuch's token, and after inspecting it, they recorded his name and time of entrance, then let him in. Head palace maid Ileana has been waiting for the supplies. Hurry in. Yes. Conrad adopted a deferential tone, maintained his back slumped to match the eunuch whose identity he stole, and walked in. The road left no room for ambiguity, and in less than a minute, he reached the central office in which several maids dutifully handled their embroidery tasks. Threads and needles intertwined and moved at breakneck speed, with the maids' focused eyes never shifting from their work. Order, discipline, and efficiency drove the workshop. They were led by a tall palace maid dressed in a close-fitting cyan robe that perfectly highlighted her well-proportioned curves. There was no excess in them, and they couldn't be compared to the likes of Phaedra and Aliki. However, they only served to enhance the remarkability of her face. A beauty that eclipsed a field of blossoming flowers. Her silky green hairs were held in the traditional bun allowed for head palace maids, and her slit emerald eyes contained inviolable pride and dignity which, when combined with her Lamia bloodline and cultivation base, gave her a natural, compelling aura that would lead normal men astray without them ever realizing it. In his past life, Conrad had seen many beauties. But they were after all mortal without any striking aura to boost their presence. With time, all of them became mundane, and it was nigh impossible for him to stare due to a woman's appearance. But for an instant, he stared. A woman not to be trifled with. That was his first assessment, and playfulness stepped aside for seriousness. This world is different from the Earth you came from. The powerful races often all possess their own unique charm, while those with high cultivation bases also boast preternatural presences. That woman is at the 8th step of the true knight rank, and very close to the 9th. That matched with her natural assets, it is normal for you to feel dazed. In the future, you will have more surprises. Informed the system in a relaxed tone. Maintaining his slouched posture, Conrad stepped toward her at a hurried pace and presented the fabrics container. The head eunuch sends his regards. And at the moment she laid her eyes on him, Conrad used his female dream theft ability and peered into her core, most primitive fantasy. What he saw didn't startle him. But the system which shared his visuals was perplexed. Ileana's slit eyes glanced at the eunuch for an instant, but before they bypassed him, she spotted an anomaly that arched her rounded eyebrows. The head eunuch mentioned that the head maid was graced with good fortune and would soon see her wish fulfilled. And in a flash, her face contorted into a deep frown which then vanished as if nothing had happened. Is that so? Is the head eunuch flattering me to make up for the quality of the fabric? I need to review them to make sure you're not trying to swindle us. Come with me. She ordered and led the way toward her private quarters. In silence, Conrad followed, never letting his gaze rise until they passed the entrance toward her bedroom. Unlike their inferiors, head palace maids and eunuchs possessed their own private quarters which they could set up to their liking. Daring to use such parlor tricks to disguise yourself in the inner court. Is it bravery, or is it stupidity? Her sharp, chilling tone carried a threatening vibe that would put most ill at ease. But knowing full well that this was nothing more than a test, Conrad remained unfazed. The difference between the two is the likelihood of success. If you dare, you must have some confidence in your odds. Otherwise, it is indeed stupidity. And since I dare, I am of course fully prepared. Is that so? Well, I care not about your appearance. What I care about is the words you spoke of before. Can you really provide me with a high-grade true spirit restoration pill? From the words spoken earlier, she had deduced that he brought with him the promise of a true spirit restoration pill. For the sake of that item, she could look beyond his disguise. I can indeed. In fact, I can guarantee you will obtain them by tomorrow evening. Having slouched for too long, Conrad sat within the rattan chair in the corner of the room and exhaled a long breath. Ileana paid no heed to his rudeness. How many can you obtain? How many do you need? 2. Then I can get you 2. What do you want for it? Anyone that did some digging would know that she could not afford those pills, so if he came to her, it couldn't be for money. What are you not willing to give me? Conrad inquired while locking his piercing gaze on her to observe any potential change. As long as it doesn't go against my conscience, there is nothing I cannot give you. The determination within her voice made her statement look irrevocable. Inwardly, Conrad was startled. It seemed he had underestimated the value she attached to those pills. It seems you cared deeply for the person you want to save. Once more, a brief frown flashed by her eyes. But it didn't escape Conrad's attention. Don't look at me like that. Spirit restoration pills only have one use. You want 2, it doesn't take a genius to figure out why. One is for you, the other is for someone likely to have been injured by a spiritual attack. The correctness of his assessment played no part in the negotiation, so she didn't bother replying. Very well, I will not make things too difficult for you. What I want is simple. He began, and his lips curled into a mischievous grin. I want to go on a date with you. What? This time, Ileana couldn't prevent surprise from showing on her face. Are you not aware that romantic relationships between eunuchs and palace maids are punished by death? There were many cases of eunuchs and palace maids losing their lives for simple trysts. He seemed like a sensible person, and she didn't believe that a sensible person would dive into such a risky path. I am well aware. But I do not care. What, are you afraid? It seems like you really are a stupid person. Ileana concluded with her eyes wide open. Stupid or not, I will make you mine. Unbridled confidence rippled within his words. Confidence that made Ileana wonder where his assurance came from. With the purple bead concealing any trace of his incubus aura, and the theft of the eunuch's appearance, Conrad looked no different than an ordinary human youth. But even then, as he sat cross-legged on the rattan chair with his profound gaze peering into hers, the light shining within them made her unwilling to underestimate him. Very well, I agree. Come find me tomorrow night with the true spirit restoring pills, and I shall entertain you. There was nothing more to say. Conrad stood up, bridged the distance between them in 3 short steps, and brought his face an inch away from hers. She didn't evade, meeting him with coldness and defiance. He said nothing and walked toward the exit with his hands clasped beneath his back. What an odd woman. Observed the system as Conrad walked out of the pavilion. When you think of it, it's nothing surprising. Those women are trapped in the palace for years without the chance to have a relationship or to even see a real man. developing some odd fantasy is only natural. In any case, it's not like I haven't seen worse. To be roughly taken from behind every night by a man I yearn for, yet can never see. That was her core fantasy. Needless to say, it didn't quite match the aloofness with which she usually portrayed herself. Women are natural dreamers. The more you try to restrain them, the more their thoughts wander. That aside, why didn't you use the purple bead on her? That would have made everything a lot easier for you. It's very likely that you could have even taken her on the spot. To this, Conrad smiled with his usual touch of mischief. And miss out on such a fine challenge? It is not every day that I find worthy opponents. I should at least give her a chance to fight her way out of my clutches. For 3 seconds, the system was rendered speechless, but afterward, it burst into laughter. Wahaha! Did you think yourself cool and fancy? You have less than 3 days, and you want a challenge? He, you better believe that when the time comes for me to administrate punishment, you will have no chance to find your way out of my clutches. Black lines crept on Conrad's forehead, and all his excitement went to the gutters. That aside, how do you plan to obtain the high-grade True Spirit Restoration Pills? High-grade True Spirit Restoration Pills were priced at 8,000 EXP in the system. Conrad couldn't afford one, to say nothing of two. While he could gain EXP with intercourse, Phaedra and Aliki were, on one hand, standing too close to the Holy Consort, and on the other hand, he wasn't about to go burst 6 nuts into them just to get the required EXP. All good things required some moderation, right? Naturally, I will go make money. The official currency of the Holy Flame Empire was crystals. 1 purple crystal was worth 1,000 red crystals, which were, in turn, each worth 1,000 blue crystals. The average commoner household's yearly income was 100 blue crystals. A True Spirit Restoring Pill was priced at 100 red crystals. As for high-grade True Spirit Restoring Pills, they were between 700 and 800 red crystals. Even Imperial Knights couldn't afford that. Conrad first regained his real appearance and made his way back to his quarters. Once inside and sure of being far from prying eyes, he sat cross-legged and entered the system to look for the cheapest low-ranked True Spirit cultivation method he could find. Clear Heart Scripture, low-ranked True Spirit cultivation method, 1000 EXP. He exchanged it for the 1000 EXP and exited the system. His EXP count then dropped down to 4515. The system made no distinction in prices between martial and spiritual cultivation methods, so their costs were similar. In the outside world, however, that was not the case. Spiritual cultivation methods were by far rarer than their martial counterparts and were thus priced much higher. There were 2 reasons for that. The first was that for every 10 martial cultivation methods, there was only 1 spiritual method. The second was that just like nobility monopolized martial cultivation methods, the Holy Flame Church monopolized the spiritual counterparts. Placing the Clear Heart Scripture within a bag, Conrad exited his quarters and went back toward the kitchen where Alan and Ralph tended to their duties. "Done with your task?" they asked as they saw him sneak back inside. "Not quite. Who among you is the most familiar with the auction department?" "That would be me," Ralph replied with soaring pride. And seeing Alan gritting his teeth but not contending, Conrad carried on. "Do you have contacts known for their greed? The greedier, the better." At first glance, one might worry about the trustworthiness of greedy business partners. But in some cases, they were the best option. Conrad needed someone with an eye for opportunity who would be willing to ignore the odd for the sake of profit. Greedy people were perfect for that. Moreover, they always controlled much more wealth than their rank could usually afford. Yes, I have the perfect man. His name is Hans. Although he's just a mid-ranked eunuch, he has a lot of connections to the head eunuchs of the auction department. As long as there is a profit to be made, there is nothing he's not willing to do. That was precisely what he needed. Lead the way. All right now? Yes. Through Conrad's commanding tone, the importance of this matter and its impact on future work and cooperation was made clear. That being the case, Ralph didn't dare delay and led the way toward the auction house. Two can cover for three, but how can one achieve that? Hopefully, they will soon be back. Alan lamented while getting back to work. The road toward the auction department was shortened by a succession of teleportation circles. The Inner Courts auction house was a massive golden mansion that screamed wealth and opulence for all to see. Ralph carried Conrad inside and then went to fetch his connection. Soon, he returned alongside a short, pudgy, middle-aged eunuch whose prominent belly giggled with every step. "Is this the honored guest you mentioned? Isn't that just another low-ranked eunuch? Ralph, are you wasting my precious time?" The eunuch inquired with an increasingly threatening tone. "Cut the crap. I don't have time for your bullshit. I give you one chance to buy this thing from my hands. What you do with it afterward is your problem," he said while throwing the clear heart scripture at Hans. Auctions took time to organize. Time Conrad didn't have. The best option was to use pressure to get the best deal possible from Hans. At first, when he grabbed the manual, Hans was merely intrigued. But as he browsed through its content, his eyes widened in disbelief. Tiru, True Spirit Rank Cultivation Method? Treasure. True treasure. Ralph was horrified. But Conrad gave them no time to get over their emotions. "I give you 3 seconds to give me a satisfying price. If I like it, it's yours. If I don't, I leave. No bargain, no bullshit." The initiative was within his hands. There was no reason to hold back. 1. 5 purple stones. Conrad was stopped dead in his tracks. The market value of a low-grade True Spirit method was 1 purple stone. Was that eunuch led astray by the pressure? He didn't think so. Deal. But a deal was a deal, so there was no reason for him to probe further. And hearing his approval, Hans exhaled a sigh of relief. In fact, he hadn't gone astray. The value of an auction True Spirit method for him was way beyond what he just gave up because those who would bid for it were mostly the pawns of the Holy Flame Church. Adept Knights could live for 15 decades, so although Hans was already 80 years old, he still had many years ahead of him. However, there was no hope for him to break through the True Knight rank in a lifetime, unless he obtained a True Flame baptism from the church. It was something that money alone could not buy, so he didn't hesitate to give up the result of decades of shrewd management in one purchase. Was he a greedy hound? Certainly. But to be greedy across centuries, he first needed the matching lifespan. It was totally worth it. The exchange was made. Conrad received his 5 purple coins, which he pocketed before exiting the auction house alongside a dazed Ralph. A transaction of 1 purple stone was something he didn't believe he could witness in a lifetime. But now, 5 had exchanged hands right in front of him. Some time was needed to adjust. "Ha, you've returned. Quick, quick. The supervisor is about to make his round." And the trio resumed their work for the rest of the day. By the time they completed their tasks, the moon hanged within the sky. "You have served me well. What do you want? Money or cultivation methods?" Conrad asked as they returned to their quarters. If they wanted cultivation methods, he would bring one out of the system. If they wanted money, he would take it out of his pocket. It was also an excellent opportunity to see what kind of people they really were. Money. 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 They sang like a choir. Men of low vision yearned for wealth. Men of high aspirations craved power. Conrad didn't need men of high aspirations, therefore, he was satisfied. "Very well. This is your reward. Split it evenly." He then tossed them a purple crystal and slipped into his bed. But the poor guys were left speechless. At first, they didn't know what to do and poked the purple crystal with their indexes as if to test its authenticity. "Mom, Dad, I'm rich. Sis, I can now afford you a dowry." They then turned to face one another with eyes set ablaze by the prospects brought by their newfound wealth and pulled each other in a warm, not so manly hug. "We've made it." The average commoner household's yearly income was 100 blue crystals. They now had 500,000 each. Their family's days of struggles were over. They were rich.